Today we're going to be talking about my experience owning the Tamron 28-75 for a whole year as a filmmaker, photographer, with lots of examples and lots of honesty. Wow, a whole year. Fuck. So when I got the Sony A7 III, I was rocking the 50mm 1.8 with the Sigma MC11 adapter whilst I was trying to decide which lens to get that was going to work for all my needs. Luckily, I landed my first documentary gig and I needed to invest in a lens that was going to help me produce the best quality image that I could and also be a good fit for the run and gun style that the documentary required. And that led me to actually picking up the Tamron 28-75. Fast forward 1 year later, using this lens in bigger documentary projects, smaller passion projects, photography, product commercials, lifestyle videos, etc., I can conclude that if I could only have one lens, it will be this one. Now, this won't be a spec tech heavy review. There are hundreds of those on YouTube. It's kind of just me sharing my experiences and how I feel about this lens. And I thought it'd be good to let you guys know if you're doing the same things that I do. Regardless, I'm going to start with the value of this lens because at the point where I was starting my filmmaking career, I didn't have a lot of money lying around to get the most expensive lens, and this lens was roughly around 700 UK pounds. And for that price, you get the 28-75mm focal range, all at f2.8. And for me, that was clutch because I knew that I was going to be in situations where I didn't have control of the lighting. So being able to stop down to 2.8 was going to come in very useful. Now for that price, the closest competitor to the 28-75 is the Sony 24-70 f4, but it is an f4. So the closest competitor in terms of performance is a G Master 24-70 f2.8, which runs just under £2,000 in the UK, depending where you get it. But if you compare the Sony G Master in terms of performance, they are both almost the same. The difference is negligible. So you're almost paying 3 times the amount for literally just having a button on the side and the switch. So that's quite an expensive button. Also, both lenses are quite chunky, which kind of leads me on to the build quality of this lens and why I'm very happy with it. If you actually look at the Sony A7 III body compared to DSLR cameras, it's a small body, and you shouldn't really be putting a massive lens with a small body. It doesn't really make any sense. You're kind of putting weight in places you don't really want. You want to have a nice balanced system. If we look at the 24-70 in comparison to the Tamron 28-75, you can see that the difference is massive. And as someone who's going to be running around with camera gear, I don't want to have a bad back. I had to travel to Japan for another documentary that I was doing shortly after this, and I feel like had I not had this nice light compact lens, I would have struggled a lot to fit everything in my backpack and to be able to travel the way that I did comfortably. So I'm super happy of how light it is and its size without having to compromise on the focal range and the low light performance. Also, I love movement, and I feel like if I had a very heavy lens with a gimbal and a monitor, my back, my arms, they will struggle very much. Might mean that I need to go to the gym more, but it's easier to just get a lighter lens, isn't it? Truth be told, when you're shooting handheld movement, which I actually did a lot of, it is good to have a nice heavy system, but it doesn't really mean that you need to get a very heavy lens. If I want to have a heavy system, I add a cage, I add a monitor, and I add a top handle, and by that point I already have enough weight to make sure that my movement is stable. If you want to learn more about my handheld filmmaking rig, I made a video where I actually broke every component down. So Tamron also added a weather sealing gasket, and that is super useful. I've been in situations with this lens where it has been raining or at least just spitting, and I like the feeling of not having to be worried that there are raindrops going to fall into my sensor and ruin my camera. So thank you so much for that. Also with steam, especially in climates where it's a bit more humid. This lens has a coating which reduces ghosting and flaring, allowing you to preserve the sharpness of your image. And that's great if you're a photographer because you don't want anything to get in the way of your crisp, sharp images. But as filmmakers, we know that we like our flares, and we like flares to look cool because it looks all cinematic and all of that stuff. Here are some examples of flaring with this lens. You let me know your thoughts below in the comments if you think that this coating ruins the flares or not. Regardless, if you wanted to have bloomier flares or you wanted to have a specific type of flare, you can always add a filter on top. Promise filters, tropic color filters, there's plenty of them around. So It's not really a deal breaker for me. So going to performance, autofocus for me for the Sony a7 III, which has great autofocus, is clutch. It's something that I didn't actually get with the 50mm, unfortunately. Having great autofocus is perfect. It's great for doing these talking head videos. It's great for shooting interviews because you can actually just set it to have face tracking and you don't have to worry about it. There is no hunting, there is no problems that you get with this lens. I do know that in the early productions of it, there were some issues where you'd have to turn the camera off, but for me, I don't have any issues. Even when I was tracking objects on a gimbal, no problems at all. So I'm super happy with it. And with photography, do I even say anything? It literally just focuses where you want to focus. It's like it reads your mind. But let's give credit to the Sony for that great autofocus system. So in terms of focal range, this might be a deal breaker for some of you, but in order for the lens to be so compact, Tamron had to design it to start at the 28mm focal range. This is to do with glass physics or whatever, which means that you don't actually get it as wide on the wide end as you do with the 24-70. The difference between 24mm and 28mm is actually quite big. So if you're shooting properties and you have to be indoors, 28mm is literally not going to cut it. You need to get a wide angle lens. For me, I was very fortunate enough to be able to get the Tamron 17-28mm, allowing me to have the nice wide end, get to 24 and beyond in the wide side. But if you're looking to have a lens that's got a nice wide end, this just won't cut it. However, on the long end, I'm very happy because I like to always push my lens to the furthest focal length, especially if you're doing weddings or you want to kind of be that fly on the wall type of filmmaker. Also, if you want to get nice compression in your background from the long focal range, 75 is nice. It's almost like 80, like an 80mm lens at f2.8. So I'm pretty happy with it on the long end. The short end, for me, it's not a deal breaker, but for some people, it might be a deal breaker. I did have an issue when I was shooting an engagement party indoors. 28mm was just not enough. I had to really move back when I was about 2 meters away from a group, and that was kind of where I struggled a little bit with this lens. If you're using a 24-70, you won't actually have that problem. Another thing that I really like about it is the actual filter thread size. Not only is it the same throughout most of the Tamron lenses, but 67mm is nice and small, which means that my filters are not like 300 pounds or something ridiculous. Now, my biggest con with this lens as a filmmaker is that the focusing ring is not very accurate. It's actually pretty bad in my opinion. It is focused by wire, which means that it's done electronically, and there have been a lot of occasions where I would set focus, and if I defocus and then if I come back, it wouldn't go back to the same spot that it was. As a filmmaker that uses manual focusing a lot, it is a bit of an issue. You do have to trust your peaking lines and you have to trust your eye to make sure you're always in focus, which is a bit stressful. I would like it if the focusing ring was much more accurate. I know the Sigma ones are really good. Also, they have flipped the focusing and the zoom rings. Some of you might be like, oh my god, but for me it's chill. So that's kind of the only thing for me. It is a bit of a drawback, and it's quite a big drawback if you use manual focusing a lot, but luckily I've been doing a lot of videos where I just rely on autofocus. It's not been that much big of a deal, but if I'm using like a focus pull, I might struggle with that. And that's really because it's a photography lens, it's not a filmmaking lens. It just works really well for filmmaking. On that very sad, depressing note, that's pretty much all I have to say for the Tamron 28-75. I'm super happy with this lens. The fact that I only really have one con for the lens, it shows a lot about it, and I would actually get this lens again if I could, if I needed to, if it broke or something, because I don't really see the need for me to get any of the other ones. Picture quality is crisp, it's sharp. I'm just surprised how Tamron managed to do so much and give us a good quality piece of glass for that price. It's been a year, I've done a lot of projects with it, and I have had no regrets. So yeah, if you like this, if you like the video, make sure you leave it a like below. And if you're down there and you want to subscribe, then help yourself to subscribe for more content. And if you have any questions about it, make sure you leave them down in the comments below, because I read every single comment. With all that being said and done, I'll see you and this lens in the next video.